is this thing called a cross-functional flowchart. So we're going to select this, and it kind of gives you like canned colors, but really we just want to start with the blank cross-functional flowchart. So this is your what we call a swim lane diagram or cross-functional flowchart. So you click on that, and it's going to create that for you. And tell me if anyone if everyone's got to that point.
Yep.
Or struggling to get there. You hear, Janet?
Yep.
All right,
I got
cool. All right, so this is what we call a swim lane diagram. This is going to be the default image you're going to get. We're going to change it quite a bit, but at a basic level, this is what you're going to be looking at. It has two really fundamental components. It has a swim lane, and each swim lane is going to represent a functional group, and that a group can be an individual, it can be a city, it can be a department, it could even be a piece of technology. And sometimes, you know, we'll even have like technology as a whole as a swim lane. So as we get into this process, you're going to start to understand, like, okay, when do you need to make a new swim lane? You know, if they say, hey, I do this, and then I send it up to Sean for his review. Well, that Sean exists as a different swim lane, right? That's a handoff. So typically when a handoff occurs, that's where we're going to be creating a new swim lane. But before we get into that, let's talk about a few things, and let's just kind of go through the shapes we're going to be using. So you can do a bunch with this right off the bat. You can extend it by pulling this little, you know, by grabbing this and extending it to the right, and you can kind of go as far as you want, you know, to the right there. So practice extending. This is going to be an important tool because our process maps are almost never very short. Processes can be very complex and detailed. So let's go to the 50 inches mark here, which is right there. Okay.
Yep.
And then also, as an additional thing, you could add new swim lanes. So click on a swim lane, right click, and you should see insert swim lane after or before. You can do one before. So like if they say, you know, oh, you know, ah, shoot, I forgot, something happens, someone sends this to me, you can insert a swim lane before, or you can insert a swim lane after. Is everybody able to do that? Adding swim lanes?
Yep.
Okay, so let's add 5 swim lanes for now, just to keep it consistent. The other thing that we're going to be doing is you can click in this box. You can change that swim lane to the functional group title. So let's just say Sean, you know, or we can do this. This is an example. Let you know, okay, trainer, which is Sean. Sometimes we do the group or the title and then the name sometimes when it's applicable, right? When there's only one trainer, we just might include their name. You know, trainee. You could go, you know, Visio, for instance, might be a group here because everything's being performed in this software. So if there's an act where Visio is like going to do something, like where Visio has an automated function, you know, Michael and Gary can talk a lot about this, but like, you know, technology sometimes can have a automated query or a automated component to it that runs at a certain time. And so that might be that technology itself is performing a function. So we'd have that there, you know, and this can be, let's say, you know, ISI maybe, and let's, you know, maybe we go DCFS or something. You know, those are all examples of functional groups. They can have roles in the process. And so everybody create those functional groups and tell me if you have an issue doing that. Everybody got that?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. And let's say if you go sticking with the swim lanes, let's say if you're working with Visio and DCFS isn't really in there, you can always cut the swim lane out and that'll remove the swim lane. Okay, so another thing you can do is you can expand the swim lane. So let's say you have multiple things in the swim lane and you need extra space. You can always expand the swim lane as well. So a lot of times there are like parallel things happening within the same swim lane, and you might need more space to write that. Again, don't be afraid to expand the swim lane you know, create additional room for yourselves. Whoops, messed up there. And we'll talk about, you know, in a later session how we remedy this at the end of the product. But that's important too. You're going to be doing that all the time. And you know, when they get really big, you might have to zoom out and actually expand well beyond, you know, just to see, okay, that's going to fit everything. And the ultimate goal here, or one of the ultimate goals, is to keep everything nice and orderly and visually appealing. All right. So we got our swim lanes, we got our functional groups. Now we're going to talk about the actual.
Hey, Sean?
Yes.
Just to make sure everybody understands how, can you more explicitly show them how to zoom in and zoom out?
Sure. Yeah. So just like in Word, there's a zoom level here. You can use this to zoom in. You can use it to zoom out. You can press Control and scroll like that. There's a bunch of different ways you can zoom out quickly. You know, let's say you want to make a new. You can always make a new document. You go to File. You know, let's talk about File. You go to File, New, and that, you know, you make a new swim lane like that. Great. Then you've got a new swim lane. Okay. So everybody make a new swim lane just for the hell of it. Everybody have a new one?
Yep.
Everybody practice zooming in and out. All right, so let's talk about using the new swim lane. Let's talk about the shapes we're going to use. You're really going to use three or maybe four, but really three core shapes. So there's the first one is the start and end shape. Start. This denotes the beginning and the end of a process. And this can occur at the beginning and the end of the entire process, or it could be the beginning and the end of a sub-process within the swim lane. So someone could say, you know, we do this and then it you know, it ends and we don't come back to it for another, you know, I don't know, a year, right? You might have an end there just to denote that there's a big stop in the process here. But you're always going to start with a start-end process step. The next one is the most common one, the process box. So this is going to denote a process or process step in the process. They're going to use this all the time. And so again, make sure, you know, these shapes are available here on the left side of your screen. Does everybody see the shapes they have? These are like the core shapes here.
Yep.
Okay. And then the last shape you're going to be using is a decision point. So this marks a decision in the process, and this is a little more. It's a little easier to see this in practice, but ultimately, when a process has two different paths it can take, typically it's going to result in a decision point being needed to insert into the process. So it could be, do I want to have coffee or tea in the morning? Well, that's a decision point, right? You're going to either have coffee or you're going to either have tea. And if that's different, and if it's always coffee, that's not really this. They may say, you know, I make a decision about whether I'm having coffee or tea. Well, do you actually have tea ever? No, I always have coffee. Well, then that's not really a decision point. Or maybe they have tea, right? They buy the materials to make tea, but they never drink tea. Well, that's a good, maybe you'd put the decision point in there and say, hey, you have a decision here to have tea, but you never have tea. You have all this inventory to make tea. Maybe you get rid of that inventory, and that will save you a lot of money when you go to the, you know, or again, it may save you a lot of space. You know, maybe they have to look through their bags of tea and coffee, and it's taking time because they have to parse through tea that they never use. So decision points are really important because they denote choices in the process, or they denote decisions, and they also could potentially denote rework loops, which we'll get to in a second. But ultimately, these are the three process steps you're going to be using the most. There is, you know, I don't even want to get into them, but these are the three core processes. And so one other thing that we like to do all the time is increase the size of the font. So the default's to font size 8. So everybody, you know, you can highlight them individually and right click and then increase the font that way. I think it's 2 clicks to get to 10, or you can highlight them all and go to, the font and actually change the font to 10. And why we do this is simply because it's easier for the client to see. We will eventually, I'll talk about what we do when we print the maps, but long story short, it just makes it a little easier to see once it's printed, because 8 is fine, you can always zoom in, but 10 is just a little easier to see. So we typically try to change the font size to about 10 or even bigger. 10 is a good size though, because you'll start to understand how much you actually have to pack into these process steps. Okay, so we've got our process steps on the map. The other thing we do kind of at the onset, and what I'm going to kind of walk you guys through here, is kind of each of the kind of functions on the ribbon here. So you got your home, function. This has your font. It's much like Word, but it has your font. It has the color. You can change it has the connector here. So this is a connector, right? You can actually create a connection point between 2 process boxes. Then you'd have to come back though. So if you use the connector here, you have to come back to the pointer tool. You can change the color of the line. You can change the color of the box. If you have this little, if everybody doesn't know, this little pin the ribbon, you can pin this ribbon, or you can, unpin the ribbon, which gives you a little more space. I typically like to keep it unpinned, but it's a little tedious having going back and forth. So if you have the space, you can keep it pinned. And then you can change the color of the line. Go back to the pointer tool, change the color of the line to, whatever, black or red. So this is where your fill is. I'm going to talk about align and position later, but let's go to insert. These have some things we use often, which are called callouts. So another thing we use pretty consistently is this thing called a callout. So on the process box, sometimes it'll say, brew the coffee. Maybe that's a step, but but outside of the step, there might be additional information like, they use Keurig. Not spelled Keurig. I don't drink coffee. It's like EURIG, right? Use Keurig coffee maker for this step, or maybe they say something like, don't really like coffee, but like the caffeine. So again, it's anything additional. These callouts are really for us to make notes about what occurs in a specific step. And I'll talk about this when we get into the actual mapping process, but typically we want to keep the steps as relevant to the actual step as possible. And then anything additional that we want to use to augment the step, any additional information, like potentially an opportunity. If we have any thoughts or any notes or anything that we might think is additionally relevant that doesn't really occur in that step, but might be relevant to us better understanding the process, we use a callout. So callouts and process steps are really the extremely common things we use. And you have a lot of options for callouts.
Hey, Sean.
But yes.
I was just going to say, just to augment what you said, quite often what we use callouts for is to capture error conditions and error occurrence rate. So on Sean's example, one of the things we might note when we're talking, they go, yeah, well, we're supposed to brew the coffee, but probably 75% of the time, the cabinet doesn't have any coffee in it. So those kinds of things you really want to capture. That's when Sean talks opportunities, that's what he's talking about. They say, when the client grumbles or the client mentions, we don't have the coffee that we need most of the time when we want it. That's a perfect example of an error rate that, on the flip side, is an opportunity for improvement.
Yeah,
silly
great
example, but
No, that's a good one. That's a great example. And again, Gary and Michael, you guys have done this a lot. So again, feel free to chime in at any point if you can augment what I'm saying. You guys have done this a lot. So So ultimately though, yeah, these are, in the insert category, the thing that you're going to be using a lot is the call out, right? Okay, they state the process, but then they say something about, like an error rate or a waste, like it could be, brew coffee. Well, they never drink coffee. Maybe this is wasteful. Maybe they always just brew it. I never get to it. I always brew it. Or maybe my Keurig does it automatically. I don't know, right? Never drink it. Or maybe even better, only ever drink 10% of it. And then everything else is waste, right? So they're wasting 90% of the coffee that they brewed.
And Sean, I think another thing too is that sometimes when you're working with organizations and they're describing their process could be like sentences long, and you're trying to figure out a way just to give it a short name so that it fits in the box. And so sometimes you give it a very brief description so it fits in the box, and then the description of that goes in the call out, because what we want is uniformity in our process box sizes, and we don't want them getting way too big to house information that's been provided by our clients.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And we can export each process step and their call out, their associated call out, to an Excel document, and ultimately kind of use that as our reference and remove the call outs, right? Let's say we wanted to have a clean process that shows what they do from start to finish, but just shows the process without any of the, any of the notation or the call outs. This kind of enables us to kind of keep the process clean, but then have all of this notation that helps us ultimately make informed decisions about how to improve their process, or why their process is, why they're struggling to execute the process, or what have you. So that's what you're going to be using here. And again, another thing, there's this connector option also.
Hey Sean, one other real quick. And this was not clear to me at first when I initially started doing this. We don't take notes in addition. When you're capturing this is your document. So when there's things that the client states that are relevant, you want to capture them on this document, typically via the call outs. If it's not a decision or a step, you want to capture it in a call out. And I don't mean to say that you capture what they say verbatim, but if there are significant things, error rates, rework loops, I can't think of what else, but this is your document. There's not some accompanying document that you're capturing along with it. This is it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, Gary, that now that you bring that up,
real quick,
originally we had a software lane. Sometimes they may have a number of software systems, and you might only be able to fit in one software lane. So the call out might actually be the software system where that process is taking place.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point too. And again, what Gary said is just dead on. It's gonna really, a lot of it's, we typically work in 2-man groups, or 2-person groups. Sorry, Janet. And so we're meeting with a client. We're discussing their process, and there's really 2 people there. And so one person facilitates, really is asking the questions. Okay, what do you do? Why do you do that? Why are you struggling with that? That seems weird. Why do you do it that way? And then the other person is documenting in the process map. And so that's why, I was talking to Joe earlier, but that's why, it's really important to, type speed, fluency with Visio. It's all that stuff is important, because, if Gary's facilitating, he can really get them talking, and you might have to be capturing all of this. Hey, and again, he might say to you, hey, put a call out, make a call out here, put a call out, and we'll, put a call out on this box. And I'm going to go as we get through this, I'm going to go into how you number these boxes, but you say, put a call out there, so you go insert quickly, call out, boom, and then, type call out based on facilitator direction, or, you know, whatever the call out is. So it's going to be really important for you to get familiar with what you can use, because when we're with a client, time is very precious. They're going to give us amount of time. They're going to be very sensitive to the time we have with them. And so getting familiar with this is really important, because we might only have 2 hours or 3 hours to capture a large portion of their process. And if we don't have the detail we need, we can't really assess where the waste exists or where the issues exist and provide meaningful recommendations. So, all right. But again, you can, you know, so if you click on everybody do this, if you click on a box, you should see 3 arrows come out. These little like semi-illuminated arrows. They're almost a little transparent. And this gives you options of what the next step shape is going to be. Typically it's going to be a process step, but, you know, it could be a decision point, right? You know. So does everybody see that? Can everybody do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So, you know, and again, this is a thing to make it really quick when you're going through, you know, just creating additional process steps as you go, you know, as need demands, increasing the size of or the length of your process map. And again, I don't know, Gary, Michael, how long do these get typically?
30 feet,
Yeah, a lot of feet. So
30 feet long, 4 feet high.
yeah, they can be pretty.
Oh, we had some longer than that in Arizona. We had some that we had to split in half. They were closer to 50 feet.
So
yeah, you'll figure out the fun limitations of Visio as you.
Yeah, the real estate of wall space.
Yeah, that's definitely limited. So, you know, again, this is an easy way to kind of add boxes and quickly go along as someone is facilitating. But, you know, again, the issue is I haven't really found a good way to create a template that starts with 10 size fonts. So you kind of have to, I wouldn't do it, you know, you can kind of do it in retrospect or as you're cleaning up the process maps, but, you know, you can always kind of get a group of them and size the font correctly. So let's keep going.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah.
So excellent. I mean, so really part of this is basics, but as we're going through, Sean is doing a great job of showing you some of the speed tips. And so to complement, so to back up, you almost never pull a shape off of your left margin. You almost always do what Sean just showed you. And then there's one exception that I want Sean to show you. And so you've got these things laid out and the client goes, oh, whoa, wait, I forgot. Right between that box and that box, there's another step. And so, yeah, so there's the first box. So that's box 1 and that's box 2, okay? And so the client goes, there's one in between. And you go, well, now my arrow won't pop. Show them how to insert a box, Sean.
Yeah, so you can come and grab a box, and it will actually let you shoot a box in between that box and that box, and now you have a new step there. Like if they forgot something, or you know, again, you go, you know what, that happens here. Do we need to? And again, this is tricky because it's not always as clean as this, because as it gets more complex and as they're like, you know, because sometimes it might be, you know. Return 3. That might be the decision. You know, that's obviously a general decision, but, you know, then you can come up here, you know, this is a connector as well. So just like these are called connectors. So you can actually manually create a connector through this, and you can go, well, if the decision was no, then you have to return to step 3, or let's say step 2. And now you have this, and now you have to deal with this line as you move through. So that can kind of be a little tricky, but this is called a rework loop in general, right? It's where they have to kind of, if it's a point of failure, like, right, if the answer is no or yes, the question is return to step 3, and the answer is yes. Consider that a point of failure, and that has to go back to brew coffee, right? Or maybe they forgot, like they're going through this and oh, you know what, they brewed it, they got caught up in a meeting, they forgot to drink it, now the coffee's cold, but they don't like drinking cold reheated coffee. So now they have to rebrew the coffee. And the question is, did you forget to drink your coffee because you got distracted? Yep. Well, All right, now you got to rebrew it. And so now they've done the same process twice. You know, and one of the things we want to create as consultants is balance the checks and balances to ensure that we're not repeating the same step, because all of this is waste. The second time of it is unnecessary. It costs time, money, resources, makes people do things that where they should be focusing their effort on more value add stuff. So that's the kind of, you know, things Gary's talking about. But yeah, that's a good point, Gary, is that, you know, you can grab these shapes, you know, and again, maybe it's like it's so far up, or you have a really long process step and you have one shape that's like here, and it's, you know, typically you would actually add the shape on top, but you can add shapes, you can insert them between the lines, and as you go through, you'll see where you can do that cleanly and where you can't. But for the most part, that's the method, you know, the best method to do that is what Gary was saying, is just insert it in between, grab a step and insert it in between, you know, step 1 and step 2 or whatever. All right, so those are the two things you need to know in the insert ribbon: callouts and connectors. And the other big thing that we do always is in the design setting, there's a couple things to note. So this is really important too. We like to just keep this as clean as possible. And one of the reasons we do this is because we're going to print all of these maps, and the easiest thing to print and the cheapest way for us to print is to do it in black and white. So there's all of these different, you know, color schemes you can use, but ultimately we use this simple one. It's just black and white, makes everything simple. It's, you know, it's easy to see. It comes up pretty easily. You know, sometimes you have to darken. It also translates well when we're actually kind of leaning the process, because we're going to go, you know, as I talked to you about in home, we're going to go and say, hey, where's the waste? And we might ask them to like make the boxes red or make them yellow, or, you know, put a red line around them or something. So it kind of makes them pop on a black and white screen, because we're really concerned about where the waste and the opportunities for improvement exist. So back to design. That's in the design themes section. So that's, you know, when you start your map, always convert it to black and white, the simple theme. Just have it be black and white. Try to get it to 10 font as much as you can. You know, again, keep the lines clean, stuff like that. The other thing is, and this is, you know, we'll make kind of an actual SOP for this, but sometimes you get this weird like extra space here. And so you got, when you print or above it. So when you print a map, it's going to print based on this space you have. And so the way to resolve that is you go to size, you go to fit to drawing, and it's going to fit your drawing to where the process map lines exist. And so that's something we use all the time. That's, you know, size, that's in design, size, fit the drawing. And again, maybe this doesn't have any white. So it's like, you got a process box like here, you know, and you want to keep it there. You're going to size, fit the drawing, and it will fit to the process map as you designed it based on the swim lanes. Okay, so that's something we use all the time. Or you want to shrink it. Okay, I got all this extra space, size, fit the drawing, boom. And there you go. So those are the two things we typically use in the design ribbon, or the design tab on the ribbon there. So the simple themes, we create a simple theme and we use size a lot. Let's see, nothing really in data, nothing really in process. We will use that, but that's more advanced. So the other thing to note that's somewhat important is we also like to have discussions as we're going. You know, there's some things here like the ruler. You can remove the ruler if you want, or remove the page breaks, those gridded lines right there. You know, that's not necessary. Some people like them. Doesn't really matter, but it gives a little more clean look if you remove the page breaks, the guides you can remove. But one of the things we like to do is number our shapes, because maybe a facilitator is trying to discover what's occurring in the process, and they want to have a discussion about, you know, for instance, if I was like, you know, Gary, put a call out on box, the box that says this, right? that's a little more complicated than just saying, Gabe, put a call out on box 2. And so to number your shapes, this is important. Go to add-ons in view, go to view, add-ons, Visio extras, and then number shapes right here. And so now it's going to give you this like numbering shapes little taskbar. And so you can do it a couple ways. You can do it by clicking, manual by clicking. So if that's, if you really, if you really want to be have the numbering scheme to have a certain flow, you might do it manually by clicking. But for the most part, we're just going to auto number the shapes. You're going to start with 1, and then you go press OK, and it's going to give every box a number, including these swim lanes. That's kind of one of the downsides of this. It will also give your callouts a number. So a lot of the times we will do this. We will go add-ons, Visio extras, number shapes, and then continue numbering shapes as dropped on page. Okay, so now as I make new shapes, they'll get a number. So I'll show that again. Again, it's view, add-ons, Visio extras, number shapes, and then you can again auto number, press OK, but you want to have continue numbering shapes that's dropped on page as you're documenting this this process. And because of the way it divides this, you get this like really weird. We were like, can we ever figure out how to get rid of this one, Michael?
Yeah, sometimes you just have to do a find like you just did and delete it.
I just control find those numbers and delete them. So those are the real things you're going to be using. There's not a lot. There's some more complicated stuff, but from a documentation standpoint, if you're if someone's facilitating a meeting, you're documenting. That's really all you're going to be doing. You're going to be dragging and dropping process steps, or you're going to be adding process steps actively, just using this, the little highlighted arrow. Boom. Boom. You might need to expand your process lanes. You might need to add new swim lanes or shrink swim lanes as they, as necessity demands, right? You might need to go to, review view, number your shapes like I talked to you about. Go to design, size it back to fit drawing. So those are the things you're going to be doing kind of as you go through as someone who's going to be capturing the facilitator's documentation. Okay.
Yep, makes sense. Hey,
right.
Sean, I have a quick question. Can you delete any of the numbers? Like say you don't want to number the swim lanes per se, and you want to take those out. Will the numbering of the process steps then automatically update?
So it won't like update that now you don't have a 24. Or like if I delete 41, it's not going to go, oh, there's no 41 there, I should add 41 somewhere else. It's just going to not have a 41.
Okay.
So I mean, I don't want to really get too much into it, but a lot of times we'll end up deleting the numbers anyway and then renumbering it because it just makes it more clean. Because when you have, sometimes we'll have processes that will, this is a process flow, and there will be also a process down here running in parallel with it, right? And so, that we want it to be more like numerically or chronologically accurate based on how it's numbered. But if you drop it here, now it's 61 and it doesn't really mesh with 39 or whatever. So sometimes we'll end up deleting the numbers after we've done the process mapping activity and then renumbering it manually. But for the discussion, for the point of discussion, right? Like it makes it easier to say, and Gary is a big proponent of this, rightfully so, that it's just easier to say, hey, number 61, put a call out on 61, or
absolutely,
hey, let's talk about 64 a little bit.
Yeah.
So, don't worry too much about the numbering. When you're in front of the client, when I get into like what we do for cleanup, we'll talk about how we remove numbers and potentially like what we want the finished product to be.
It look like,
but The real important part is the client facing component of this, because behind closed doors, we can all sit together and kind of go through this.
Yeah, we knock
But
it
if
out.
we're in front of a client, you know, your ability to like do this pretty seamlessly is going to be important insofar as how much time it takes us to do this, if we look professional, you know, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
we just want it to be, you know, that's